Hey everybody, it's been a while. This is Nikki Burnett and Gabrielle Grandel, and this is Functional Friday. Finally. It seems like it's been forever.
We're bringing it back. Functional Friday 2021.
Yeah,
We
even
try to do these,
improved.
that's right. We try to do these on the first Fridays of every month. We're going to try to get back to that. It's going to be at 12 p.m. Central Time, 11 Mountain Time, and whatever time frame
Yes.
you're in.
Yeah.
We thank you for joining us today.
Yep.
And we always want to make the disclaimer that this is for educational purposes only, and it is not medical advice.
That's right. So there's so much to talk about. And so I think that, obviously today we want to talk about, for one, PCR testing, but we also want to, talk a little bit about some other things, surrounding the PCR testing. But we want to make sure that you also know that what our goal is in these conversations is to bring to you the best knowledge that we have. We try to really kind of dig through so much that's out there, because you got so many sides and so many opinions, and some data and some that's not data, and we really want to take the time and literally we do this all month long as we're researching on our own, and then we get together and we talk about these things, and we try to bring to you what we think is the very best and the truth to the best of our knowledge. We also are very aware that we aren't the developers of PCR testing or any other testing, but there's some data out there, particularly from the developer of the PCR test itself. So with that, I say we just kind of jump in and talk a little bit about, what it is, what we're seeing with it, and, start to dig in a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And we've been doing a lot of practices out here, and the cornerstone of this is in relation to the case numbers going up, and that's what we've been dealing with, over this past year. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about why that might be, and we've done that in some previous videos, but we just want to remind everybody that the way that we confirm a case is through a test, through a positive test. So we thought it'd be important to talk through that in a little bit more detail, but starting off with just kind of showing what's been happening with the cases, even, although we've been distancing and people have been wearing masks and things like that. So we have a couple graphs that we wanted to show about that.
Yeah. So we've shown this before. Let me get to where I can share it. We've shown this graph. It was a couple of months ago. And do a quick screen share. And basically this is really just a reminder about, what it is that we've seen since masks were required, right? So this isn't a mask talk. We've had that talk. And if you want to go back to it, then that's great. But we need to understand that no matter what, if you can, I'm hoping everybody can see this, this graph, but we've got Austria, mask required, cases go up. Germany, masks required, cases go up significantly. I mean, everywhere, no matter what, where masks are required, cases are going up everywhere. And so then, masks versus no masks is still going up, especially, I mean, look, this one to me is really intriguing. So you've got, European COVID cases, masks in black versus no masks in red. And look at this. And still the cases go up and up and up and up. So we have to ask the question, why is that happening? Because it really doesn't make sense. And I know that people will complain about people not wearing their masks, but really for the most part, when it's required, because you want to, we've talked about this too, you want to respect the business, you want to respect the people who own the businesses, because you don't want to shut them down, because every day, how many hundreds of thousands of businesses are going down or going out of business because of the shutdown. So the intent is never to shut more businesses down and just not wear your mask. You know, if you don't want to wear your mask to some place that's requiring it, then you don't go. And there are also differing opinions about that, and that's okay too. But the fact is, the cases, no matter what, are going up, and masks aren't doing anything. So
Doesn't seem like
anyway, yeah, it doesn't at all. Yeah. Okay. So I think moving into where we need to ask the question is, why is this happening? And is it potentially because of the testing, which is what we want to talk about here. And I think that the likelihood is very high. And that's what we really want to talk about, because we hear about the false positives and the false negatives, but we want to, it's a matter of understanding what the PCR test is, what other testing there is, why we test, what they're finding when they test, and what is it that makes the most sense, right? Because for one, the testing companies are all using different thresholds. And so I don't know, I don't want to jump into something too soon, Gabrielle, if there's something that you want to say, because I know we needed to explain what a threshold is.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's important for people to know, and we're not going to get, on some super nitty gritty stuff. Neither of us work in labs or anything like that, but we do understand how the tests how they work. And we want to just kind of give an overview of that and what's available. So there's a couple of different kinds. We have an antibody test, and then we have the PCR test. And the antibody tests are actually not used as often from what we've been seeing. And some experts would say that they don't use the antibody testing. They don't think it's as accurate because we can develop antibodies, prior to being infected with the virus, and they can also linger in our system for a couple of weeks after acquiring the virus. So they don't really always consider that as a real clear assessment of viral load. So most people are using the PCR test, which is the one that they stick in your nose, and it's the rapid time. They have that option as well. And so PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. And basically what's happening here is they're taking DNA from your nasal pharynx, and they're putting it under a microscope, and they are amplifying it because these are microscopic segments of DNA. They're protein fragments and DNA fragments. And so they amplify these up to a certain level where they can then see them. And once they see them, then they can confirm that as positive, right? And so that is what's happening. And what we know is that anything that is over 30 threshold, so the cycle threshold is how many times they amplify it, right? And so anything that's over 30 is, in previous PCR testing, that was what was known was to produce dead nucleotides and what's called a false positive. So it would look as though it was positive. In reality, it's not a direct measure of the viral load. I hope that makes sense. And so the inventor of this test, which is Kary Mullis, he's passed away now, but he is he won a Nobel Prize for this. He's a Nobel Laureate, and he's the inventor of this PCR test. And he says that it is not to be used for diagnostic purposes, meaning it's not to be used to diagnose somebody with the virus. It doesn't prove that they are sick. It is meant to be used as a confirmatory, it is meant to be used as part of a confirmatory test where we would look at this if we saw somebody with symptoms, right? And we would try to run this test to help identify what was going on. But then it needs to be followed by another confirmatory test that actually looks at viral culture. So if we understand that we can take a piece of DNA and it can be amplified, so high to make it look like there's something there, it it makes sense to then look further to actually confirm, is that really true? Is that really in the person's system, and to what level?
Yeah. So I keep looking away because I'm looking, as we're talking through this, I'm looking at the data that we have that we've kind of taken from this. And so this particular article that I think that we need to post, and it is from the Center of Evidence-Based Medicine. And so it's a really interesting article. So if you want to take the time to look through it, there's a lot to it. But they do, the questions in here, is PR testing sensitive enough? And then talks about culturing a virus as a reference test. And so one of the things it says here, PCR tests might find what's looking for. This results in PCR positive, but a crucial question remains: is this virus active or infectious, or is it virulent? The PCR alone cannot answer this question. The Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, or CEBM. Now I lost my place. Explains why culturing the virus is needed to answer this question. In viral culture, viruses are injected in the laboratory cell lines to see if they cause cell damage and death, thus releasing a whole new set of viruses that can go on to infect other cells. I'm just going to read this one last paragraph because I think it's important. That is, if the PCR detects the virus in the human sample, this detection might correspond to a virus that is now incapable of infecting cells and reproducing. Biologists can tell if the virus is infectious by injecting it into cells, culture cells. If these cells are not affected by the virus and the virus does not reproduce in them, then the PCR test found a virus that no longer is active. So I just think that that's such a huge and important point in understanding, we're going, I mean, it's every day I'm hear somebody going, I'm going to get tested. I'm going to get tested. I got to get tested. I'm going to get tested. And they may be positive, but they don't know they're positive because they're not sick. Oh, I was exposed. So, well, they're positive, but they're not sick. And so we gotta understand the limitations of the test, the limitations of the thresholds, and the fact that, that has now just changed as of, what was the date? January 20th, these threshold, the recommendations through the WHO changed. And so before we hit that, I want you to talk about what you found to show, that there is no, all the testing here in the United States, all the thresholds were different.
Right. Yeah. So,
right?
Yeah. And that last statement on what you were just reading, where it says, so the meaning of the PCR positive is a non-infectious positive. And I think you kind of already alluded to that, but so
it's important to
you don't need to be, you're not sick. You're not infectious, even though you might have a positive PCR. And so, right. So then the other problem was, so there's several different issues going on. So one, there's a high likelihood of error with the drive-through testing when somebody's just standing out there, and it's not in a sterile environment. There's issues with Q-tips. There's, on a side note, there's also this talk about this new test that's going to be released where somebody can collect their own sample at home. So I mean, how many errors are likely to come of that? But that's a story for another day. So there's likelihood of errors in the collection process itself, but then no one was requiring any kind of standardization, which is, which doesn't make sense. So we need to, if we know, and Anthony Fauci even said this back in March, that anything over 30, he actually said 35, I believe, but what we know is that anything over 30 produces, it's dead nucleotides. It's going to produce false positives. So it would have made sense that all the labs would have been required to have the same cycle threshold, and it should have been 30 or less, right? Because that's what we know about that. It should have been less, and they should have been required to report that on their results, and they were not. And what I found was the 5 test brands that were used in the United States to measure PCR was Quest. Their cycle threshold was 50. The company called Embios, theirs was 45. Luminex, also 45. I think I'm saying this right. Nomega, 39, and then Thermo Fisher, 37. So all of these well above the cycle threshold of 30. And again, no requirements to present what it is that they're actually doing. So it's just a free for all. Everybody do whatever they want. And that's not the way that's not the way science works. And that's not the way we can, accurately assess results.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. So yeah. And then
I know I'm looking back at my notes now. Sorry.
I mean, I think that was, yeah. And then the next thing we were going to talk about is, so there was some pushback against that, and people started to recognize that. And then, on January 20th, the World Health Organization introduced their new guidelines. And so we can read from the article that we will also post here from the WHO that they sent out. And so let me just get over there really quickly.
I've got it. So I'll talk about just what their guidance is at this point, and if you want to talk about
go ahead.
The next comment. But so, and this comes directly from WHO guidance for SARS-CoV states that careful interpretation of weak positive results is needed. 1, the cycle threshold needed to detect a virus is inversely proportional to that of the patient's viral load. Where test results do not correspond with clinical presentation, a new specimen should be taken and retested using the same or different technology. And
then there's another article that that says most PCR assays are indicated as an aid for diagnosis. Therefore, healthcare providers must consider any result in combination with timing of sampling, specimen type, assay specifics, clinical observations, patient history, and confirmed status of any contacts and epidemiological information. So a lot more elements to consider now that are clearly important to look at.
Yeah, yeah. So my hope is, I don't know that it's necessary that we need to go much deeper into this. Our goal is that we see all sides of a situation, right? Because we can be told one thing and we can search for one thing. We already know that there are search engines that allow us to see certain things and search engines that allow us not to see certain things. And we don't use those search engines, but we're pretty careful about where we're getting our information, who it's coming from, is it one-sided, is it not one-sided? Again, our goal is to bring as much truth as possible. We're not always going to be right. We're here just to, maybe think outside the box a little bit and bring more than just one side to the story, and maybe motivate one of you, some of you, any of you to do a little bit of your own digging into and researching into some of this so you can find your own information, because I think that's important. I think it's really important that we all educate ourselves. We love to educate ourselves and to help to educate others, but we know we're not the end all be all, but we the world that we now live in, we have to know where the good sources are, how to find them, and get really good information, because there's so much trash information out there right now on so many things that it's hard to dig through. It's really, really hard to dig through. It's sad and it's really scary. Yeah. So you know, you can't take things anymore with a grain of salt. You can't trust everybody and everything that they say, especially with as much conflicting information that's out there. So I think that's all I have to say. What do you think? Anything else, Gabrielle?
Yeah, I second that. Uh, that's our goal here, is just to provide what we know, and then you will make your own decision. But we want to present a narrative that's not being shown to the masses. And I think we all need to wonder why that might be.
Yeah, agreed. All right, perfect.
Thanks for
Well, we'll
listening.
plan to do this again on the next first Friday. So it will be I don't know what's the day, but it'll be the first Friday of March. And we'll have something else. I don't even know we know what we're talking about yet. Actually, we did talk about it, but we'll make sure that we know what we're talking about first.
That's the plan. But as always, you know, if you guys want, if there's anything out there that you want to talk about, we totally invite you to share with either one of us or comment on this. You know, any questions you have, or anything you want to learn about, you know, within the realm of health and wellness. We want to serve you in that way. So we always appreciate you being here, and yeah, that's it. So hope you guys have a good
yeah. Thanks everybody. We'll see you in a month.
day. Take care.